I just touched down in Arizona, and let me tell you, that plane ride was a whole horror story by itself. I don't know what was scarier, somebody's baby screaming in 3 different octaves, or the man next to me who insisted on eating beef jerky at 6 a.m. The turbulence had me gripping the armrest like I was holding on for my life, and the flight attendant looked at me like, "Sir, please stop praying out loud. But hey, we made it. And now, the desert is calling." When I stepped out of the airport, the first thing that hit me was the heat. Arizona heat is different. But there's a beauty here that you feel instantly. Those wide open skies, those red rocks, and that strange quietness like something is watching you from way out in the desert. Perfect for a haunted series, right? Before we jump into ghosts, Arizona itself has a pretty wild past. This place was built by miners, ranchers, and folks who looked danger right in the face and said, "Yeah, I can survive that." From ancient Native American civilizations to Old West shootouts, outlaws, and gold-hungry prospectors, Arizona has seen everything except a slow day. And you know, anywhere that had that much chaos is definitely holding on to a few restless spirits. But Arizona ain't just tumbleweeds and old mines. It has a personality. It's one of the few places where you can see a breathtaking sunset, a tarantula crossing the road, and someone selling homemade cactus jelly all within the same hour. And honestly, that combination alone tells me the ghosts out here probably got jokes. The haunted history of this state runs deep. Ghost towns that froze in time, abandoned hotels with doors that open by themselves, mines where miners swear they still hear voices echoing underground, and desert highways where mysterious figures appear in the headlights. Arizona is truly a playground for the paranormal. And if you know this channel, then you already know I'm ready to explore it all. So welcome to Arizona's Most Haunted Places, Part 1. I'm here, I'm sweaty, my luggage barely made it, and my Uber driver told me 3 ghost stories before I even reached the hotel. That's how I know we're in the right place. So are you ready? Let's get into it. Back in the gold-hungry days of the 1860s, Vulture Mine in Wickenburg wasn't just a patch of dirt. It was the place to strike it rich, die trying, or get haunted into oblivion. Founded by Henry Wickenburg after he literally tripped over a quartz outcrop glittering like a prospector's fever dream, the mine churned out more than 300,000 ounces of gold. That's a lot of bling. But where there's gold, there's greed. And where there's greed, well, you get curses, ghosts, and the kind of eerie vibes that make your mustache curl backward. The town that sprang up around the mine, Vulture City, boomed with over 5,000 people, most of them dusty, sweaty, and superstitious. And if the gold didn't get you rich, it probably got you dead. Let's talk about the hanging tree, shall we? Legend has it that 18 high-graders, the 1800s version of gold shoplifters, got caught red-handed and were given a VIP ticket to the afterlife. Front row seats via a noose dangling from that gnarly old mesquite tree. It still stands proudly, waving its spooky branches like it's auditioning for a Tim Burton film. Visitors claim the tree feels heavy, which is a polite way of saying, "I think I just walked through a ghost." Some tourists report cold spots in 110-degree heat, while others swear they heard a raspy voice whisper, "It was just one nugget." If you suddenly get the urge to apologize to a tree, don't worry. You're just being polite to one of Arizona's most judgmental spirits. Now, if the tree doesn't rattle your spurs, let's head to the assay office. This building once held millions in gold ore, and apparently some of that wealth still clings to the walls. Literally. But before you bust out a chisel, you should know the place is haunted tighter than a banker's wallet. Visitors say they've heard deep guttural voices in the smelting room and seen tall, dark shadows glide across the floor. One guy even tried to sneak a rock out in his backpack, only to have his flashlight shatter and his shoes untie themselves on the way out. Coincidence? Maybe. Just down the lane is the old brothel, where the motto might as well have been, "Good times, bad decisions, eternal hauntings." The ladies of Vulture City didn't just charm minors, they apparently charmed the afterlife too, because the brothel remains one of the most spirited places on site. Doors swing open on their own, perfume wafts through the air like someone's prepping for a date night, and a few guests have reported hearing flirtatious whispers in their ears. One poor soul claimed his beard got stroked by invisible fingers. "I didn't hate it," he said nervously. "Hey, who said ghosts can't be affectionate?" Let's not forget the Glory Hole cave-in of 1923, a horrifying accident where part of the mine collapsed, burying 7 miners and 12 very unlucky mules. Nobody was recovered. Ever since, strange knocking sounds echo through the tunnels when no one's down there. Superstitious miners called it the Devil's Morse code and would refuse to go underground if they heard it. Today, tour guides warn you not to whistle in the mine because it annoys the ghosts. But if a disembodied pickaxe swing responds with a beat, you've invented spectral techno. Congratulations. Some swear they've heard muffled voices calling for help. Personally, I'd just toss down a ghost snack and skedaddle. Then there's the story of Jimmy Davis, a young miner who got sucked into a piece of heavy machinery in the 1910s and went full human spaghetti. Legend says you can still hear him crying for help near the powerhouse around 3 a.m., which is the exact moment you should not be hanging around a cursed mine anyway. The machinery where he met his end now rattles occasionally, even though it's deader than the saloon menu. The rest of Vulture City isn't much quieter. In the schoolhouse, there's a dusty old doll that's known to change position. Over at the mess hall, phantom aromas of coffee and flapjacks will hit you like a friendly breakfast ghost, which is nice until you realize the stove's been out of commission since Roosevelt was president. And don't even ask about the old post office, where a vintage phone reportedly rings at midnight. Pick it up and a ghost might just try to extend your car's warranty. And that, my brave cowpoke, is Vulture Mine, Arizona's spookiest gold rush relic where the buildings sag, the spirits flirt, and the shadows have opinions. Some folks leave with gold-flecked memories. Others leave with a story about how they ran screaming from a breeze that sounded suspiciously like a miner saying, "Git." So whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or just someone who enjoys being scared silly under the desert stars, remember? The dead don't rest easy when their gold's still buried, and they sure as heck don't like visitors messing with their stuff. When you walk into the Gadsden Hotel in Douglas, Arizona, it doesn't greet you like a normal building. It greets you like an old movie star who refuses to admit she's been here since 1907. Marble columns, a grand staircase, and a giant stained glass mural hit you all at once, like the hotel is whispering, "Welcome, darling, and don't touch anything." This place was built during the boom days of cattle towns, copper mines, and railroad money, and it has the kind of glam that makes you instantly suspicious that ghosts probably roam around holding martinis. Of course, glamour doesn't mean the place has had an easy life. In 1928, a fire tore through the hotel like it was auditioning for the role of tragic backstory. Almost everything burned, except the marble staircase, the elevator car, and a few stubborn columns that basically said, "We're not going anywhere." The hotel was rebuilt in 1929, even fancier than before, because Arizona believes if life knocks you down, you stand back up taller, shinier, and with better lighting. Then there's the famous legend of Pancho Villa. Story goes that during the chaos of the Mexican Revolution, he rode his horse straight into the lobby and up the marble staircase, leaving chips from the horse's shoes on the steps. Now, whether that was Villa or a drunk cowboy who thought he was Pancho Villa is still debated, but the hoof marks are still there, and the hotel treats them like priceless art. Honestly, it's the most Arizona thing ever. Look at this historical damage. Isn't it beautiful? Naturally, a place with this much drama refuses to be ghost-free. Guests report knocks on walls, footsteps in hallways, and TVs turning on and off like the spirits are still fighting over what to watch. The staff even keeps binders full of handwritten ghost reports, which is charming until you realize that means it happens often enough to need binders. That's when you start sleeping with one eye open and checking your corners like you're in a horror movie. The most famous hotspot is room 333, a room that has absolutely no business being that haunted. Legend says a young boy fell to his death long ago, and now his restless spirit hangs around the upper floor. Guests claim something sits on the bed beside them or tugs at the blankets. Some swear the TV clicks on in the middle of the night, not to anything educational, but to static, because apparently the afterlife still doesn't come with premium cable. And the boy isn't alone. One guest swore an invisible figure climbed into bed with her and refused to move. Another said their golf clubs toppled over on their own. People hear knocks on walls, whispers in empty rooms, and footsteps pacing at 3 a.m., which is disrespectful because that is absolutely not a reasonable hour for ghostly cardio. It's like the spirits run night shift while the living run day shift, and nobody consulted anyone about boundaries. The basement is a different level of nope. People claim to see a tall man in khaki clothing wandering the halls, sometimes with a head, sometimes without one. When a ghost can't decide whether it wants its head today, that's your cue to go right back upstairs. Some say he's a soldier, others say a miner, and one person swears he followed them to the elevator. Imagine pressing close door faster than you ever have in your life. So why is the Gadsden Hotel haunted? Because places with this much history simply refuse to be quiet. Fires, revolutions, tragedies, legends of cowboys and revolutionaries, decades of guests, and countless emotional moments have soaked into the walls. If energy leaves an imprint, then the Gadsden is basically one big paranormal scrapbook. People come hoping to see a ghost. The ghosts stay because, honestly, the hotel is too fabulous to leave. And if you decide to spend the night, just remember, you're not alone. You're just sharing the space with some very long-term guests. The Yuma Territorial Prison didn't just earn a reputation, it snatched it, buried it in the desert, and dared anyone to come dig it back up. Built in 1875 on a rocky bluff overlooking the Colorado River, the prison opened its gates in 1876 and immediately became known as one of the toughest places in the Wild West. Picture it, blistering heat, rattlesnakes sunbathing like they owned the place, and guards who acted like they were one bad day away from turning into prisoners themselves. It wasn't hell on earth, but it was about 3 exits away. For 33 years, Yuma Territorial Prison held murderers, train robbers, cattle thieves, and at least one man whose crime was writing bad checks, which honestly feels a little harsh when you consider half the inmates before him probably stole entire herds. Prisoners slept in iron bunk beds inside adobe and stone cells that somehow managed to be freezing at night and scorching during the day. One inmate described it as sleeping inside a brick oven, and he wasn't wrong. If Arizona heat today will melt your sandals, imagine Arizona heat in 1880 with no AC, no shade, and a warden yelling at you to walk faster. Now, the real jewel of the prison was the dark cell. If you acted up, or even looked like you might, guards threw you into a deep stone pit where there was no light, barely any air, and definitely no comfort. Inmates were chained to the wall and fed bread and water. Today, tourists step inside and say things like, "Ooh, spooky." Meanwhile, prisoners back then were saying, "Lord, if you get me out of here, I promise to behave forever." The dark cell gained such a reputation that even guards were scared to go near it at night. And that, my friend, is where the hauntings begin. Visitors, guards, and volunteers have reported hearing whispers inside the dark cell, even when no one else is around. Some say they've felt a cold breath behind them, which is impressive considering Yuma rarely gets cold at all. Others say they've seen shadowy figures pacing the hallway outside, as if long-dead inmates are still waiting to be released for good behavior, which is hilarious because if they behaved well, they wouldn't be ghosts in a prison. One of the most famous spirits is a prisoner known for causing chaos when he was alive, and apparently still at it. People describe a mischievous ghost tugging at shirts, poking visitors, and tapping them on the shoulder. Imagine coming all the way to Arizona expecting a quiet tour and a 130-year-old inmate hits you with the old gotcha tap just to see your reaction. Nothing says eternal punishment like getting stuck haunting tourists who bought their tickets half off on a Tuesday. But the most emotional spirit is said to be that of a young boy who drowned in the Colorado River long after the prison closed. He wanders the cell blocks, searching for his mother, and visitors often feel a small hand tug at their clothes. Some even bring him toys, which mysteriously move overnight. If a ghost child is going to rearrange things, at least he's polite about it. Unlike some ghosts who throw stuff for no reason other than boredom, women who visit the prison often report another ghost. The woman in white, believed to be the spirit of an inmate's grieving wife. She roams the corridors, especially near the museum area, wearing a long flowing dress. Some women say they feel a sudden chill. Others say they get a soft push, as if this ghost is saying, "Honey, you could do better than him," even though she's been dead for a century. Today, the Yuma Territorial Prison is a historic park, a museum, and one of Arizona's most haunted locations. People visit for the history, stay for the ghost stories, and leave because something invisible touched them on the lower back. The prison may have closed in 1909, but the inmates, well, let's just say some of them are still doing their time. And if you ever visit and hear someone whisper your name in the dark cell, just assume it's a ghost inmate trying to say hello, or possibly asking you to switch places. Either way, run. If Arizona ever gave out an award for most likely to still be turned up after death, the Birdcage Theater in Tombstone would win without competition. Sitting right on Allen Street, it looks old and quiet from the outside. But back in the 1880s, this was the wildest spot in town. It opened in 1881 as a theater, saloon, gambling hall, and brothel all stacked together like someone tried to fit Las Vegas inside a shoebox. Tombstone was booming with silver money, rowdy miners, and people who seemed allergic to good decisions, making the Birdcage the perfect place to spend money, or lose your life if you weren't careful. Originally, the Birdcage was supposed to be respectable. The owners thought they could bring classy San Francisco entertainment to Tombstone, even offering a ladies' night. The miners took one look at that idea and laughed like it was the funniest joke they'd heard all year. So the owners adjusted, and by adjusted, I mean they turned the place into a non-stop adult playground filled with music, gambling, whiskey, and the kind of live performances your grandma better never find out about. Before long, the theater was running 24/7, becoming home to cowboys, outlaws, miners, and anyone else passing through who had cash, boredom, or both. The little balcony boxes lining the walls, called bird cages, were actually private rooms for the working girls, their curtains barely hiding the chaos. Gunfights were so common inside the building that it's riddled with bullet holes. Over 24 deaths are believed to have happened right on the property, which probably explains why some visitors still feel like they're being watched during the tour. Down in the basement, things got even more legendary. That's where the Birdcage hosted what's rumored to be the longest-running poker game in history, a game that went on day and night for years. Famous gunfighters like Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp are said to have played there, putting down big money, big egos, and occasionally big tempers. The stakes were high, the cigars were thick, and the air was so heavy with tension you could have sliced it with one of those fancy gambler pocket knives. When the silver boom crashed in the late 1880s, Tombstone's population dipped harder than someone trying to avoid paying their bar tab. With fewer people, fewer dollars, and fewer reasons to party, the birdcage finally shut down. But instead of being remodeled or turned into something cute with gift shops, it was basically sealed up, and everything inside stayed frozen in time. When it reopened years later as a museum, the original tables, stage, and even some personal items were still right where people left them. And then the ghosts started showing up for their shifts. Visitors and employees swear they see figures in old-time clothing wandering the hallways or peeking from the balcony boxes. Women in corset dresses, men in dusty coats, even shadowy shapes crossing the stage like they're late for a show that ended 140 years ago. People hear boots walking, poker chips clicking, phantom laughter, and voices answering questions when nobody living feels like talking. Some even smell cigar smoke or perfume from a century ago, which is extra creepy because nobody today wears that old West Ode to Dead cowboy scent. Then there's the Black Mariah, the old hearse parked right inside the building. It once carried Tombstone's dead to Boot Hill Cemetery, and now it sits in the birdcage like a VIP ghost magnet. People report cold spots around it, strange photos, and the uncomfortable feeling that someone is breathing down their neck. If the hearse ever starts rolling on its own, everyone in Tombstone is quitting their jobs and moving out immediately. Today, the Birdcage Theater is one of the most famous haunted spots in the Southwest. Paranormal teams constantly investigate it, and almost all of them walk out with stories they didn't expect. Shadow figures, disembodied voices, tugged clothing. This place has everything. So if you ever visit, be respectful, keep your hands to yourself, and don't challenge any ghostly cowboys to a poker game. They've been practicing for over 100 years, and trust me, they play to win. The Haseyampa Inn looks innocent enough when you first pull up. Quaint red brick walls, sweet little arches, and that old-school charm that makes you think you're about to sip tea with someone named Ethel. But if you stay long enough, you'll start to feel it. The shift in the air, the creak of something that shouldn't be creaking, and that one hallway that's just a little too quiet. Built in 1927 during Prescott's "We're fancy now" era, the hotel was meant to be the town's elegant showpiece. Instead, it quickly became one of Arizona's most active haunted hotspots, because nothing says luxury like a sight of ghosts. The most famous spirit? A young bride named Faith who checked in with her brand new husband back in the 1920s. According to legend, the groom stepped out for cigarettes on their wedding night and never came back. Now listen. A cigarette run normally takes 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you're dramatic. But my man must have taken a detour to a whole other life because he disappeared completely, leaving poor Faith heartbroken and pacing the halls. She waited for days, wandering the hotel in her wedding gown before falling into despair. That's when tragedy struck. Faith passed away in the hotel tower, and folks say she never checked out. Today, guests swear they still hear her footsteps drifting down the halls, especially near room 426. Some people report their doors unlocking on their own, lights switching off, and a soft, sobbing sound floating through the air. One guest said they heard someone crying outside their door at 2 a.m., but when they opened it, no one was there. And that's exactly when they packed their bags and left like they were in the Olympic sprint finals. Faith's ghost isn't unfriendly, though. In fact, she's known to be surprisingly helpful. Housekeepers say they've walked into rooms to find pillows fluffed, beds smoothed out, and bathroom lights turned on, even when no one had been assigned to clean there. Imagine being a ghost, so considerate you're out here doing light housekeeping. Meanwhile, half the living guests can't even put their towels in the right spot. But faith isn't the only lingering soul. Tucked around the old Jazz Age architecture are spirits who once loved the hotel's music, the bar, and yes, the gossip. Folks claim to hear 1920s jazz playing faintly from empty rooms, as if the spirits are still vibing to a saxophone that retired 100 years ago. Some have even seen a shadowy man in an old-fashioned suit strolling the lobby, then suddenly vanishing like he remembered he left something on the stove back in the afterlife. The elevator is another hotspot. Guests report it taking them to floors they didn't select, opening its doors before they press anything or simply refusing to move until it feels ready. One visitor claimed they politely said, "Can you go to the 3rd floor, please?" And the elevator immediately started moving. That's how you know it's haunted. Being possessed should not give a machine better customer service than actual humans. The dining room also has its stories. People have spotted chairs sliding on their own, silverware rearranging itself, and the faint image of a woman in period clothing drifting through as if she's still waiting for her table reservation from 1928. One waiter said he felt a tap on his shoulder during a slow shift, turned around and saw absolutely no one, just air and his pride falling on the floor. By the time you check out, you'll leave the Haseyampa Inn with 2 things: beautiful photos and a strong suspicion that someone invisible watched you eat your breakfast. Between Faith's lingering presence, the phantom jazz musicians, the wandering gentlemen, and the misbehaving elevator, the hotel feels less like a haunting and more like a paranormal Airbnb, minus the cleaning fee. If you're brave enough to visit, just remember, if you hear footsteps behind you on an empty floor, don't run. It's probably just Faith checking to make sure you fluff the pillows properly. Deep in the dusty outskirts of Benson, Arizona, where the air tastes like sun-baked desert and regret, sits Crook Tunnel, an old, abandoned railroad passage that looks like the kind of place your mama warned you not to go even in broad daylight. The tunnel was blasted through the rock back in the early 1900s, meant to make train travel easier. Except it quickly became clear that nothing about Crook Tunnel was ever going to be easy. Workers complained the place felt wrong, like the walls were listening. And honestly, if a tunnel is already giving attitude before it's even finished, that's your sign to pack up and work at the local saloon. The most famous spirit tied to Crook Tunnel is a railroad worker known only as Old Man Crook, the guy the tunnel got its name from. Legend says he was a tough, no-nonsense foreman whose personality was so dry it made the desert look moisturized. One day, Crook was inspecting some blasting charges when, boom, the dynamite went off too early. Workers said they saw his lantern fall, roll, and flicker out, but Crook himself? Never found. Not a boot, not a bone, not even a mustache hair. The tunnel swallowed him whole, and apparently he enjoyed the stay because folks say he still hasn't left. Over the decades, locals started reporting strange things. Travelers walking past the tunnel heard footsteps behind them, but when they turned around, nobody was there. Some claimed they heard a voice yelling orders like, "Get back to work," which is honestly rude, considering they weren't even on the clock. A few teenagers said they felt someone tug their jackets as if an invisible grumpy foreman was trying to drag them into a shift they didn't sign up for. You know it's bad when even ghosts expect you to put in overtime. Then there's the lantern story, the one that gives Crook Tunnel its creepy reputation. Late at night, people swear they've seen a dim, swinging light deep inside the tunnel, bobbing like someone's walking with an old railroad lantern. Brave or foolish locals have gone in to investigate. They always find the same thing: no person, no lantern, no footprints. But the smell of smoke and the lingering feeling that someone is standing right behind them, breathing down their neck. If that doesn't make you speed walk like you're in a horror movie marathon, nothing will. Of course, Crook Tunnel being haunted means teenagers had to test it. That's practically a rule in Arizona. One group decided to spend the night inside the tunnel, armed with nothing but flashlights and terrible decision-making skills. They reported hearing metal tools clanking, gravel shifting, and what sounded like someone muttering curses under their breath. When they ran out screaming, locals just nodded like, "Yep, that's Crook. He hates company." Even paranormal investigators have taken a shot at exploring the place. One group set up cameras, recorders, and motion detectors. The devices kept malfunctioning, turning off, glitching, or recording only silence with an unexplained humming noise in the background. At one point, an investigator swore he felt a hand push him in the back. He turned around to yell at whoever touched him, only to realize the only thing behind him was empty tunnel and a patch of darkness that looked like it held a grudge. What makes Crook Tunnel so eerie is how quiet it is. No trains, no cars, no people. Just the sound of wind drifting through like it's trying to warn you. And yet, visitors constantly report phantom footsteps echoing off the walls or the crunch of gravel from somewhere behind them. Some say they've seen a shadow figure standing at the far end of the tunnel, tall and stiff, like someone inspecting the tracks. But when they get closer, it melts into the darkness like it was never there. Classic ghost move, honestly. To this day, Crook Tunnel remains one of Benson's strangest haunted spots, abandoned, quiet, and filled with stories of a foreman who never clocked out. If you decide to visit, bring a flashlight, a friend, and maybe a resignation letter in case Old Man Crook tries to recruit you for ghost labor. And whatever you do, if you see a lantern start swinging in the darkness, don't follow it. Ghosts in Arizona might be friendly, but Crook? He's still running that tunnel like it's 1908 and you're late for your shift. The OK Corral in Tombstone, Arizona, is one of those places where the history is so messy, wild, and dramatic that if it happened today, it would be a whole season on Netflix, complete with dramatic slow-mo and a theme song by Morgan Wallen. It all started in the early 1880s, back when Tombstone was overflowing with silver, saloons, gamblers, cowboys, outlaws, and enough whiskey fumes to knock out a horse. The OK Corral itself wasn't even that big, just a livery and boarding stable, but the drama that went down nearby turned it into one of the most famous shooting locations in the American West. Now let's set the scene. Marshal Virgil Earp, his brothers Wyatt and Morgan, and the forever dramatic Doc Holliday were tired of dealing with the Cowboys, a gang that specialized in cattle rustling, drinking too early in the morning, and making bad life choices. Tensions were high, accusations were flying, and the whole town felt like a pot of chili about to boil over. People in Tombstone kept saying things like, "Y'all better calm down," but this is the Wild West. Nobody calmed down. Ever. So on October 26, 1881, the Earps and Doc Holliday decided they'd had enough. The Cowboys, Billy Clanton, Tom McClory, and Frank McClory, were supposedly carrying weapons against city ordinance, and the Earps went to disarm them. What they walked into was not a peaceful conversation, but a dusty lot next to the OK Corral, where 3 angry cowboys stood there looking like they'd already decided violence was on the menu. This showdown lasted about 30 seconds, but 30 seconds in the Old West was long enough to rewrite American history. When the gun smoke cleared, 3 cowboys lay dead. Wyatt didn't even get hit because apparently plot armor was invented in 1881. The Earps became legends, Doc Holliday became everybody's sarcastic role model, and the OK Corral became the setting for the most reenacted gunfight in U.S. history. Tombstone would later turn its spicy shootout into a full tourist attraction, complete with costumed gunfighters who probably go home at night wondering why they still let grown adults yell "bang bang" at them. Now that's the history, but Tombstone wouldn't be Tombstone without the ghosts. People swear that the OK Corral is still crawling with spirits from that deadly fight. Some say you can hear footsteps in the dirt late at night, long after tourists and tour guides have gone home. Others say they've heard gunshots echoing from the lot, like someone's trying to rerun the gunfight without telling the living cast. And let's be honest, if any ghosts would be petty enough to do that, it would definitely be those cowboys. Visitors sometimes claim to see shadowy figures near the old corral fence, pacing like they're waiting for a showdown no one else signed up for. One man once reported a ghost whispering in his ear, "You tell Wyatt I ain't done." Sir, Wyatt Earp has been dead since 1929, and he still doesn't want your smoke. Another tourist swore she walked through a cold patch that smelled like whiskey and cigar smoke. Personally, I think that might have just been a reenactor on break, but hey, let's not ruin the spooky vibe. Doc Holliday is also rumored to show up around the area, usually as a lanky shadow with a limp and an attitude problem. People say he appears right before closing time, like he's checking to make sure nobody is embarrassing him in the reenactments. I imagine his ghost pops up like, "If you're gonna play me, at least practice your one-liners." Then he disappears dramatically because even in death, Doc stays extra. Some guests have even claimed to see apparitions dressed in 1880s clothing walking straight through the corral walls, which is exactly the kind of ghostly disrespect you'd expect from people who didn't like following laws when they were alive either. Employees say sometimes the horses get restless at night when there aren't any people around, as if they're sensing something walking the grounds, either spirits or a raccoon with an attitude, because Tombstone raccoons don't play. The weirdest part? Sometimes people hear voices arguing, the same names, the same heated words, as if the gunfight is still stuck in a loop. Tour guides swear they've heard someone yell, "I don't want to fight," which historically was said right before the shooting started. And honestly, if I were a ghost reliving my worst day for 140 years, I'd be yelling too. Today, the OK Corral stands as a mix of history and hauntings, where tourists come to watch the Wild West come back to life, and the spirits of the past stick around because they probably enjoy the attention. Whether you're into history, gunslingers, or ghosts with a flair for drama, the OK Corral delivers it all. Dusty boots, old grudges, shadowy figures, and the occasional ghostly whisper telling you to mind your business. And in Tombstone, that's just part of the charm. By now, you already know, Arizona's wild. I came out here thinking I was just going to see some mountains, eat a taco, maybe take a selfie with a cactus. But no, this state got ghosts clocking in for overtime. And listen, I love y'all, but next time you tell me, go check out this haunted spot, it's real chill. I'm bringing backup, a flashlight, and maybe a priest who does side jobs. But for real, if you made it this far, thank you for rolling with me through part 1 of Arizona's most haunted places. I survived, barely. My camera survived, somehow. And my nerves? Yeah, those didn't make it, but that's all right. We replace those every week on this channel anyway. Consider it part of the Screamville employee benefits package. Now don't you disappear like one of these dusty Arizona ghosts, because part 2 is coming, and trust me, the next spots on this list are even crazier. If part 1 had you looking around your room like, is something behind me? Then part 2 gonna have you sleeping with the lights on, the hallway light on, the TV on, and the bathroom door cracked open. You know, the full protective ritual. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, tap that like, drop a comment telling me which haunted place you want me to pull up to next, and pray for me, because Arizona ghosts don't play fair. I'll see you in part 2, if I make it back.